Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Emma. Some of my tomato plants need to be pruned today, so I thought I'll take you along and show you how I do it. So do you prune your tomatoes? Why or why not? I would love to hear your thoughts, so leave your comments below. A lot of gardeners recommend to prune the tomatoes or pinch off the suckers. To find suckers on tomato plants is really easy. So follow your main stem, and then when you come up to a leaf node, and then the main stem is keep going up, and then right here stem coming out here, a lot of gardeners would recommend you to prune it off. This is like the typical size they recommend to pinch them off, or as soon as possible. Before I begin, I want to talk a little bit which type of tomatoes you can prune if you really want to prune your tomatoes. Tomato plants break down into 4 categories: dwarf, indeterminate, determinate, and semi-indeterminate. If you don't know what kind of your tomatoes you have, somewhere on your seed packets, it should tell you what type of tomatoes you have. If you have indeterminate, determinate, dwarf, or semi-indeterminate. Or if you bought your plants from the nursery, on the tag, generally it will tell you what type it is. If you definitely just Google the name, like brandywine tomatoes, indeterminate, and information are endless. Some of determinate tomatoes are such as Celebrity, Roma, Ruggers. Determinate tomato plants almost should never be pruned because all the flowers and fruits grow at once and ripen at once and harvest at the same time. If you're pinching off those suckers, you are limiting how many tomatoes you're going to get, because now you get only tomatoes that form from the main stem instead of from all the suckers. If you allow those suckers to grow, they will become main stems, and those main stems will produce flowers and turn into fruits. If you pinch those suckers off, your plants will have less stems. That means less flowers and less fruit. The only time I would prune determinate tomatoes are all the leaves and branches from the bottom of the first set of flowers. Never prune anything above the first flower cluster. And another time that you should prune off determinate tomatoes if some of the leaves are showing signs of diseases. And you don't want that to spread to the rest of the plant. So last year, I ended up just pruning very minimum, like just the bottom of the tomatoes. When you water your plants, water doesn't splash up the back of the leaves like here. And it would splash up bacteria and fungus from the soil and spread disease to your plant. We can do what we can to help the plants from get diseases. What I would do is I would prune all the stems and leaves below the first fruit cluster or flower cluster when you see them. With a sharp pair of scissors or pruning shear, just prune them all off. And this leaf is about almost a foot off the ground, and yet it's touching the ground. I'm pruning that one off as well. Because all the leaves below the first cluster of flowers or fruits, they don't contribute anything to the plants. So just clean it up. All right, look at that. It looks so much better. Now the bottom looks nice and neat. This plant looks weird because I just stake it up because it was falling over and I didn't have time to do it earlier. But so you follow the main stem up, and look at this sucker, and it's forming flowers, and that will turn into fruits. So that's why I don't recommend you to prune your suckers off. What I would do with this plant is I'm going to prune all of these side stems off, even though it has flowers, because it's too low to the ground. I should have pruned this long time ago instead of let it become this mature. Look how neat and clean the bottom is. One type of tomatoes that you can prune if you really want to prune them is indeterminate, such as cherry tomatoes, brandywine, beefsteak tomatoes. The reason behind some of gardeners recommend pruning them is to get larger tomatoes. But obviously that doesn't apply to cherry tomatoes because they are called cherry tomatoes for reasons. So the size won't affect them even if you prune them. You will be only limiting how many fruits you will be getting. And pinching off those suckers will speed up ripening time as well because all the energy is now going to the fruit to ripe it faster instead of focus on growing the suckers into main stems to produce more flowers. From my personal experience, pinching off your suckers will give you low production of tomatoes. If you want to get large tomatoes from your beefsteak, for example, then you definitely can pinch off those suckers, but then you will have smaller yield of tomatoes. I do pinch off some of my suckers through the growing season just to maintain the size of it. I would pinch a few of them off to give some airflow or pruning some of the leaves. Same thing for airflow because indeterminate tomatoes or vine-like tomatoes, the branches can get a little crazy and they get really big. And if you have a small garden and you want to maintain the size, but if you want to get a lot of tomatoes, I highly recommend to leave as many suckers on as possible. I haven't grown dwarf and semi-indeterminate, so I won't be touching on that today. Look at this sucker. It's maybe about 4 inches and it's developing flowers. So if you pinch sucker off sooner than that, then you basically throwing away your future fruits. This tomato here actually is growing on one stem. I pinch all the suckers off early on to show you what I mean. The other day I prune off all the bottom leaves below the first flower or fruit cluster. And as you can see, there are no sucker growing out. So this actually is another clusters growing from the main stem. And then it keeps go up. You don't see fruit again until another cluster here branched out from the main stem. You see how little fruit it has since I pruned all the suckers. And here I left a sucker on and it is becoming a main stem and is producing its own flowers. So I had done that for a couple of years. The first year I did heavy pinching all the suckers off, and that year I got very little tomatoes. Last year I did minimum to maintain the size and to give it airflow. What I noticed is that with minimum pruning I got a lot of tomatoes last year. It was like wow. So I highly encourage you prune your tomatoes the minimum as possible. I recommend to clean your pruning shear between each plant to prevent spreading disease. Just pour some alcohol on it and just wipe it off to prevent spreading disease from plant to plant. For small tomato plants like this, go ahead and pinch off the lower leaves. Same thing with clean hands, and between each plant, clean your hands, or definitely can use your pruning shear. I recommend not putting this in your compost bin because you don't know what disease each plant may have had. I would not recommend risking it, adding disease to your compost bin. If you prune off suckers or some of this size stems from the bottom, you definitely can put them in water and they will root and you can plant them. That's pretty much it to how I prune my tomatoes. I hope you guys enjoy watching this video and learn something from it. I would love to hear whether you prune your tomatoes or you don't prune and why. Alright, until the next time, you have a good day.